Today we have a wonderful series of lectures for you, and we'll begin with Leslie Robert, professor in management, and so she received her master's degree in the city of, I think in Russian is called Artur, but in Chinese is Dalia. Then her PhD in Columbia University. And she is going to entertain us today with her talk on mathematics and supply chain management. And let me try to say that she is also a member of IMSA board, that she advises in our connections with the board. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Actually, I didn't expect such a big crowd, especially on a rainy Sunday afternoon. So. But it's very exciting to see all these young, eager faces, young girls of the next generation. So before I start, I want to share some personal experience of myself. That's how I ended up, like how I come all the way to here. So in high school, my favorite subject was mathematics, and I wanted to major in mathematics. However, I heard from different people that you are good in mathematics, not because you are talented, but because you work hard on it. And all these boys, they don't work. But once they know how to work, they will catch up in no time. And I also got told that the math you do in high school is very elementary. But if you really want to take a career in mathematics, you need this really, really high level of abstract thinking that most girls don't have. So this was like more than 30 years ago in China. I guess you don't hear this anymore, but that's what I heard. So I wasn't confident enough to choose a major in mathematics. Instead, I chose to major in English because I also heard girls are good in languages. And if you major in English, you can get a high-paying job in one of these American companies or European companies in China and have a comfortable life. So that's how I ended up in English as my undergraduate major. But once I entered college, I found that I'm still interested in solving math problems. So I took mathematics courses on my own. And when I graduated from college, I found that my math is not solid enough to pursue a career in mathematics. So instead, I did a master's degree in management. And then I did a PhD in operations management. So here I am at Miami Herbert Business School. I'm a professor of management, and my research and teaching interests are in operations management and supply chain management. I'm not a mathematician like Dr. Pressure, but I feel very fortunate and grateful that I can use my math knowledge to build mathematical models to solve practical problems in supply chain management. So if I could travel back in time, I wanted to tell my younger self that don't be afraid. Don't let other people tell you what you can do and what you cannot do. If you really enjoy it, just go ahead and pursue it. And I also want to thank Dr. Pesher for organizing this Girls for STEM program, because I feel like, at least for my younger self, I feel if I had joined a program like this, probably I would have thought differently and be more confident to pursue a career that I really enjoy. So now let's get started. I will talk about mathematics in supply chain management. So I know you are from high school, and I will deliver this as a class to my students. So I want you all to participate. So if I ask questions, I hope you will answer. And at the same time, if I'm not clear, if you get lost at some point, feel free to raise your hand and just ask me questions. Because if you're lost, that's my problem, not your problem. That means I'm not clear enough. Do you all agree? Yes? Okay, let's get started. So first I will talk what is supply chain management. Let's start. I don't know what happened. Okay, let me use my computer. Okay, let's talk about this laundry detergent supply chain. What are the firms that's involved in the laundry detergent supply chain? Any ideas? Yes.
Chemical cleaning companies.
Oh yes. Yes, chemical companies, packaging companies. Yes, that's right. Any other companies? Yes. Advertising. Yeah, they do advertising of laundry detergent. Any other ideas?
Distribution.
Distribution. Yes. Any other ideas? Retail. Yes. If you want to buy laundry detergent, you go to a retailer. Let's say Target. Yeah, let's say Target. So the customer go to retailer to get the laundry detergent, but the laundry detergent actually travel a very long way to reach the customer and the retailer. So there are manufacturers who produce the product, and there are distributors who distribute the product to the customer. And these manufacturers, they have their own suppliers. And the suppliers have their suppliers. So there are first-tier supplier, second-tier supplier. It's a complicated system. But if you look at the system, you will see that customer is actually the only revenue generating point of the supply chain. There are a lot of transactions within the supply chain. There are transactions between manufacturers and distributors, and between distributors and retailers. But these are all internal transactions to the supply chain. The only revenue generating point is customers. So for the supply chain, their goal should be how to effectively produce and distribute the products that customer wants, because customer is the only revenue generating point. And here's a more generic view of supply chain. So we have customer who bring in revenue. Then we have retailer, distributor, manufacturer, supplier, and raw materials. It's a complicated system. And what is the objective? So the supply chain management is concerned with the efficient integration of suppliers, factories, warehouses, and stores, so that merchandise is produced and distributed. So we not only produce, but also distribute in the right quantities, to the right locations, and at the right time. And objective is to minimize the total system cost, or to maximize the total system profit. So we want to minimize costs or maximize profit, subject to actually lots of constraints. Some of it are service constraints, some of it are like a resource constraint. So subject to a set of constraints. So if you want to, are you all with me? All good? Okay. If you want to see it, here's a picture. Yeah. So supply chain consists of all these, like the suppliers, manufacturer, distributor, retailer, and customers. So the product moves from upstream to downstream. So that is from suppliers, manufacturers to customers. And the money goes the other way. So the cash flow goes from the downstream to the upstream. Customers pay retailers, retailer pay distributor, distributor pay manufacturer, and the manufacturer pay its suppliers. So there's this product flow, and there's also this financial flow. And there's also information flow, because all these different parties need to talk to each other. So there's also information flow. So the goal is to match supply and the demand. So we want to match supply and the demand. And we want to deliver the right product at the right price to the right store in the right quantity to the right customer at the right time. If we are able to do all of this, we will be able to make good profits. But that's a big if, because as you can see, there are a lot of things you need to decide. Let's say as a manufacturer, you need to decide whether I want to buy my raw material from this supplier or that supplier, or maybe I want to use a set of suppliers instead of a single supplier. And how much do I want to order? And when do I want to order? And what I want to produce? How much I want to produce? And when to produce? And after I produce it, where should I ship it? Should I ship it to this store or that store? And how should I ship it? Should I ship it by plane, by sea, or by truck? And a lot of decisions. And even like with a distributor, do I want to enter an annual contract with a distributor and give all my business to this distributor? Or should I spread it over several distributors? Or maybe I want to have one distributor, then I get the rest from the spot market. So there are lots of decisions. Same for the retailer. What product I want to hold in my store? How many I want to hold? What price should I set? Should I give discount? To who? So lots of these questions all the time. That's why, actually, you will find constraint optimization very powerful in the setting of supply chain management, because we are making this type of decision all the time throughout the supply chain. So we're doing constraint optimization problems all the time. So what is constraint optimization? Constraint optimization is to find the decisions that maximize or minimize our objective function. Let's say our objective function is a profit, then we want to maximize it. And let's say it's a cost, then we want to minimize it. Then subject to a set of constraints. We all work with constraints, basically the limitations of resources. So this is constraint optimization. We use it all the time in all types of business problems, especially in supply chain management. So there's a lot of applications like distribution, location planning, production scheduling, workforce planning, inventory management, and pricing. So it has wide applications in business and also in supply chain management. So constraint optimization, it has a lot of theory and algorithms, which I will not go over today, but we will focus on the application and the formulation, because once you formulate the problem, there are optimization software that can help you to solving the problem. And one such software commonly used is the Excel solver. So we use it all the time for the smaller scale problems. We can use Excel solver. So we will focus on the formulation of constraint optimization today. Because I believe after you formulate it, you can always find optimization software to help you to do the actual optimization. Okay, so here's the general formulation. You have n decision variables, and you call them x1, x2, x3 to xn. So these are the decision variables. Decision variables are the things you can control, like how much should I order from my supplier, and how much I should charge my customers. So these things you can control. They are decision variables. And then you have an objective function. Objective function is a function of the decision variables. You want to either maximize it or minimize it, subject to a set of constraints. So the constraint itself, it's also a function of the decision variables. It can be the less or equal to constraint. Let's say I want to stay within budget. So that's a less or equal to constraint. It can also be a greater or equal to constraint. I want to satisfy my customer's demand up to 90th percentile. So it's a greater or equal to constraint. And there's an equality constraint. So the general formulation is that you maximize or minimize your objective function with respect to n decision variables subject to a set of constraints. Any questions? Okay. Again, I want to basically repeat it because we're going to use it. Decision variables are the things you can control. So these are the things you can control. And then the objective function is something you want to maximize or something you want to minimize. They are typically performance measures like profit or cost. And then we have the feasible region. Feasible region is because you have constraints. So not the entire space is feasible, only a set of it is feasible. And this region where the decision variables satisfy all of the constraints is called the feasible region. Then we have feasible solution, that is one solution that satisfies all the constraints. So the feasible solution lies within the feasible region. And feasible region is the set of all the feasible solutions. And then we have optimal solution. Optimal solution first has to be feasible. So optimal solution has to be a feasible solution that achieves the best value for your objective function. And then we have optimal objective function value. So that is the value of the objective function you obtain at the optimal solution. So that is the best value you can achieve on your objective function. Any questions? Okay. Now let's talk about apparel business. In apparel business, there's a lot of decisions to be made, like product assortment. Which styles do you want to carry? And how to present for these different styles. Advertising. Where should you spend your advertising money? And how to allocate. And then there's pricing. What price should I charge for my product? And the whole thing is supply chain management. Okay, I just want to give you a brief. I think everybody buys clothes, so everybody is familiar with the apparel business. I want to give you some summary about the pricing in apparel business from the business perspective. So apparel business is a very interesting business. One thing is that the price the customer is willing to pay actually has very little to do with the production cost. So it's not like heavy machinery. The price is very dependent on the production cost. But here, the price a customer is willing to pay is not very relevant to the production cost. It's more relevant to the customer preference, more relevant to the style. So if you have an expensive apparel, and maybe it's of a designer's brand, it may also be that it's unique or like a very limited editions. So there are all these reasons, but not very related to cost. And the products are seasonal. So let's say the spring fashion. If you don't get it sold by May, you have to sell it at a deep discount. Because these retailers, they don't carry inventory from year to year. It's expensive and it's not worth it because nobody wants to wear last year's style. So at the end of the season, they will be sold at a huge discount. And the same is true. If you have a style that sells really well, you may sell out the style at the very beginning of the season. And you know this style sells well, and you know it's in high demand, but your manufacturer may be in somewhere in Asia. You won't have time to place another order to get another batch shipped to your store because of the lead time to get the things from Asia. So it's actually a lot of decision on the retailer how much to procure at the beginning of the season. And there are a large number of products. There are different styles, different colors, different sizes. Some of it are substitutable. You may use one color to substitute the other, let's say blue for purple. But some of them are not substitutable, let's say sizes. If you have an extra L in your extra large in your inventory, you cannot use it to satisfy the demand of a small. So it's difficult to manage. It's not only style, there's also color, there's also sizes. And for the different company, like most companies now have stores in different geographic areas. They also have the online sales channel. So there's the multi-stores and the multi-channel. Okay. And the decision, the procurement decision, also the pricing decision, are actually made by the buyers. Let's say by the buyers of the department store, by the buyers of the store. They travel around the world to these fashion shows and talk to the manufacturers and decide how much to order for each style. So these buyers are very powerful. But they make their decision mainly based on their sense of style. They have experience, they have a sense of style. They have a guess or estimate of what will sell well this season, what will not sell well this season. But it's mainly intuitive decisions rather than scientific decisions. And these buyers, they actually track inventory in store quite closely. And once one merchandise is moving slowly, they just offer deep discount on the merchandise, just want to get it gone. So as you can see, the whole pricing in the apparel business is quite intuitive. It's more of an art than a science. And that's why there's actually a large amount of money left on the table. If you could do it, use a more quantitative approach to do it, you can get extra money. So that's where we come in, because we love models, so we can help. Let's take a look. That's the simplest version of the pricing. So we just price for one fashion item. And we know that the fashion item will sell for a season of 15 weeks. So the selling season is 15 weeks. And we know that the demand of the selling season is of this nice linear form. It's a linear function of the price. So the question is, what price should the firm charge to maximize revenue over the selling season? First, I want to ask a question. Why do I want to maximize revenue instead of profit? Why I want to maximize revenue? Why I don't consider the procurement cost?
You can control cost.
Yeah, you can control cost. Any additional reasons? Reinvest what?
Because it's fixed.
Yeah, it's a sunk cost. So think about the time of the decision. By the time this inventory is on your in your store, you have already paid the procurement cost and the distribution cost. These costs are sunk. Whether you can sell them or you cannot sell them, you already incurred cost. So once the items are in your store, you focus on maximizing the revenue, not maximizing the profit. There is a decision of maximizing the profit, but it's made earlier in the season. It's like maybe 1 year earlier than the season starts, because you need to work with your suppliers about how much to order. That's a longer term decision. But once you receive the inventory, once they are already in your store, you already paid for the procurement cost. You already paid for distribution costs. So now you will focus on maximizing revenue over the selling season. Any question? Okay. So demand has this very nice curve. It's a linear function, downward sloping linear function. The more you charge, the smaller the demand. So it's a common product. The more you charge, the smaller the demand. And we want to choose a price to maximize the revenue of the selling season. What should we do? What price should you choose? And how do you arrive at that price? Anyone?
Historical prices from prior sales.
That's one way of doing it. And you can also say that the demand curve is actually estimated from the historical prices. So historical prices help you to predict the demand curve. And you have this information here already. So how do you decide which price to choose to maximize your profit? Yes.
Depends on how many you have. How many you have to stop.
Brilliant observation. Let's say you have a lot. And it's brilliant observation, and I'll come to that point later. Assume you have abundant supply. What price should you choose? What? A low price? Why? Because you have abundant supply. Okay. Actually, we can write out the revenue formula. What is the revenue for the season if I charge price P? How much money I can make? Yes.
Price times quantity.
Yeah, price times quantity. Exactly. So your revenue is a product of the price and demand. Again, here we're assuming we have abundant supply. So that's why the amount you sell is your demand. If you don't have abundant supply, you may not be able to satisfy your entire demand. Let's assume I have a lot. So my revenue is actually the product, price and demand. And we see that demand is a linear function of price. So the revenue becomes a quadratic function of price. So it has this nice shape of parabola facing downwards. So it has a unique maximum point. And that is the price you should charge to maximize your revenue. And how do I get that unique maximizing point? Any ideas? Yes, serious. Yeah, you take the first order derivative because it's a nice quadratic form, and you take first order derivative and set it to 0, and that gives you the optimum price. Exactly. Thank you. But this is like an overly simplified model. As you just mentioned, I may not have enough inventory, so I may not be able to satisfy all my demand. What are the other factors that are ignored in our simple model? Any ideas?
There can be a lot of factors.
Yes.
Like, competition,
Exactly.
time,
Right.
maybe even like something that some influence, factors of advertising or like a popular, like a sports team just won a Super Bowl game, and so you want to sell merchandise, whereas the losing team isn't selling anything. Just like all these extra factors, they're numerous and it can be anything.
Yes, yes. Are you working in the retail industry?
No.
Well, you're not? But do you shop a lot? Yes, a lot of things I ignore. Let's just, so you mentioned a lot of this. Let's just mention some of it. So one thing that's obvious is that you have a 15-week selling season. You won't just set one price. You will dynamically adjust your price. So price may be changed during this 15-week selling season. Another is, as you mentioned earlier, you may not have enough inventory, so you may not be able to satisfy all your demand. So your sales may be limited by your inventory. That's another factor. And you can use advertising to shift your demand curve. And the retailer typically carry a variety of products rather than one product. And the demand of these products are interrelated. So you want to actually maximize the revenue across a set of products, not just one product. And you typically have competition. You're not the only store who sell clothes in the town. There are competitors, and there are competitors from online stores. And there are many, many other things, like you mentioned. If a sports team win, if a sports team lose, a lot of things affect the demand curve. So let's talk about a more realistic setting. Okay, so this is a retail company. It purchased its inventory, let's say from Asia, 2,000 units, a single item. And the sales season is 15 weeks sales season. And the 2,000 units is all you have. You cannot get more from the other stores, and you don't redistribute your inventory to other stores. So you just manage this 2,000 units on your own. And your goal is to maximize the profits over the selling season. Okay, let's first look at the cost. So the production cost and distribution cost have already been paid. They are sunk costs. So you don't include that in your objective function because you already paid this. Right? It doesn't affect your pricing decision. And then there's the inventory cost. So it takes $1 to carry one piece of inventory from week to week. So what is exactly inventory cost? So think about the inventory you hold. You actually need to pay for them. There's a cost. For example, you need space to store the inventory. And you typically buy insurance for your inventory. And the inventory you hold, you already purchased them. So there's capital tied up in inventory. If you don't have this inventory, you have cash. And you could have invested cash somewhere else. So there's opportunity cost of inventory. So that is altogether, that is what the inventory cost is. And we assume it's $1 to carry one piece of the merchandise from week to week. That's our inventory cost. And what if you have leftover inventory at the end of the 15 weeks? You just sell them to discounters at a huge discounted price. Let's say you sell them at $25 per unit. And this is what we call salvage value. So if you cannot sell them to the customers, you sell them to the discounters, but at a deep discount. Okay, what about demand? Let's say week 1, you have this nice downward sloping demand, linear demand. The more you charge, the lower the demand. And there's this intercept of 655. What is the economic interpretation of this 655? Any ideas? What is 655? The intercept. Mathematically, it's the intercept.
Price of zero.
Yeah, price at zero. That's your maximum demand. Even if you give this clothes for free, you can only sell 655. That's the maximum demand. That's price at zero. So the maximum demand is 655, and as you increase your price, the demand goes down. Every dollar you increase, demand goes down by 6.5 units. Any questions? Okay. Now for the future weeks, as time goes by, every week the intercept drops by 20 units. And that's realistic because as you go further into the season, let's say this is a spring fashion items, as you go further into the season, you're closer and closer to summer. So the demand for the spring items will go down. The maximum demand of the spring items will go down, and we assume it's going down at a rate that's 20 units per week. Any questions? Okay, so this is like a more realistic and of course more complicated setting. And we can see that the demand from week 1 to week 15, the maximum demand goes down by 40% as time goes by. So the demand is actually time dependent. It's not the same demand curve for every week, but it's time dependent. As you go further into the season, the demand gets lower. And now let's look at the revenue. Assuming you have enough inventory to satisfy your entire demand, the revenue is still the product of demand and the price. So it's still this nice quadratic form. And you can still find the optimum value by taking first order derivative and set it to 0. You can still find the optimal price. So this is the case when you don't have inventory constraint. But in our problem, we do have inventory constraint. So we need a more complicated setup. Okay, let's first talk about what is our objective function here. In words, we say we want to maximize our total profit over the 15-week selling season, right? So that is our goal. Our goal is we want to maximize the total profit over the 15-week selling season. But mathematically, how do you write the total profit? Let's think about what are the components of your total profit? Yes, revenue minus cost. And what are in the revenue and what are in the cost? Let's say, what? Yes? The sum cost we don't consider because we already paid for that. It's already paid. It doesn't affect our decision. So let's start with revenue. What are the revenue? How do you write the revenue?
The sum of the price you sold it and the number you sold at that price.
Yes.
And probably depends, how many you sold at each price.
Right, exactly. So the revenue consists of the revenue you get for every week. And for every week, you have the amount you sell multiplied by the price you charge. That is the revenue per week you added up for 15 weeks. Any other source of revenue? Any other source of revenue? That is the revenue from the regular season. Yes.
Plus what is left times 25.
Yes, the salvage value. Whatever is left, you sell it at 25. That's the salvage revenue. Okay, so that's the revenue. Now let's talk about cost. What are the costs? Yes. Like what?
$1 price.
Yeah, that's the inventory cost. Because for any inventory, you need to carry it from week to week, and you pay $1 to carry 1 unit from week to week. Exactly. So our objective function, that is the profits. It includes the sales revenue plus the salvage value. Salvage revenue minus the inventory cost. We don't include procurement cost and distribution cost because by the time the units are in our store, we already paid for this cost. So this cost is not part of our pricing decision. So that's our problem. So this is all very intuitive. But in order to solve it, yes, you have a question?
I was just wondering, where do they come from, like loss and theft?
Loss and damage?
And like, right,
Attack?
yeah.
Yeah, that's an even more realistic model, which we consider it's a perfectly run store. There's no loss, no damage. But we can incorporate that. Yeah. Okay, so we know what the objective function is. Now we need to write it. We need to write it mathematically. So let's think, what variables do we need? So what are the things we can control? That is our decision variables. What are the things we can control? Price. Exactly, price. And we assume that we can dynamically adjust price. So we have PT, which is the price in week T. So this is a vector of decision variables. So it's like you can make price decision 15 times. So it's actually 15 prices. Anything else you want to use as a decision variable? Yes, Siri? Quantity. Yeah, quantity, sales. So that is how much you sell in each week. You can do without the sales variable, but it will make the formulation much more messy. So that's why we have the sales variable. So you have price and quantity. These are our decision variables. Then we need other variables. These are the variables help us describe the dynamics of the system. So we need these variables, but you not necessarily can control it, or you cannot control it directly. So these are additional definitional variables. What variables do we need? Any ideas? Let's say, how do we calculate the inventory cost? What do we need to calculate the inventory cost? Yes, quantity of what?
Oh,
Quantity of the thing. Yes, quantity of the inventory. Yes, exactly. So you need inventory. You also need to know demand. So IT is the inventory in week T, and DT is the demand in week T. Demand can be controlled through price, but you cannot directly control it. So we set it as a state variable. Okay, now we are ready to write. First, let's write the objective function. We know that the objective function is sales revenue plus salvage value minus inventory cost, right? Let's write it out one by one. So how do you get the sales revenue? With the variables we have these variables. So how do you use these variables to write the sales revenue? Anyone? Let's say, what is the sales revenue for week 1?
S1P1.
S1P1, that's the sales revenue for week 1. And sales revenue for week 2 is S2P2. So the sales revenue is basically the sum of STPT over 50 weeks. That's the sales revenue. Now let's talk about the salvage revenue. What is the salvage revenue?
You show it once at the end of the season, or you do it every 2 days?
At the end of the season. Yes.
2,000 minus all the S1, and that 2,000 times 25.
Yeah. That is exactly what it is, but we actually have a notation for it. That 2,000 minus the sales is what we call I15. So it's the end of the 15th week inventory. That's I15. So the sales revenue is 25 multiplied by I15, and I15 is 2,000 minus all the sales. Okay, now let's talk about the inventory cost. Inventory cost is a cost to carry inventory from week to week. And it takes $1 to carry 1 unit from 1 week to the next. So how do you write out the inventory cost? Let's say, what is the inventory cost to carry inventory from week 1 to week 2?
2,000 units.
No. You start with 2,000 units. Suppose you sell something in the week 1, so the ending inventory of week 1 is less than 2,000 units. So what is the inventory cost you pay to carry inventory from week 1 to week 2? I1 multiplied by 1, exactly. I1 is the ending inventory at week 1. So the inventory cost to carry inventory from week 1 to week 2 is I1 multiplied by 1. And same thing, to carry inventory from week 2 to week 3 is I2 multiplied by 1. And so on. So the inventory cost is sum of all the inventory costs over 15 weeks. So here's our objective function. So it's the sales revenue plus the salvage revenue minus the inventory cost. Any questions? Any questions? Okay. Now we need to write out the constraint. So we know our objective function, we have the decision variables, we need to write out a constraint. Okay. So first, let's think about the sales. Sales in each week, in week T is ST. What constraint should ST satisfy? What constraint should ST satisfy? Let's think about the sales in week 1. What is the constraint on the sales in week 1? Serious? Yeah, less or equal to 2,000 units. That is your supply. So your sales is bounded by your supply. What else? sales is also bounded by the demand. You can only sell as much as your customer wanted. You cannot just throw the merchandise at your customer and force them to buy. So your sales is less or equal to the demand, and your sales is less or equal to the inventory available. So in mathematically, sales in week T is less or equal to the demand in week T, and sales in week T is less or equal to the ending inventory of week T minus 1. Ending inventory of week T minus 1 is what is going into week T. So your sales is bounded by your ending inventory. You cannot sell more than you have. You cannot sell more than what is demanded. And then we have the inventory balance equation. What is the inventory balance equation? It basically helps you understand how the inventory evolves over time. How does the inventory at the end of week T relates to the inventory at the end of T minus 1? Let's say, how does the inventory at the end of the second week relates to the inventory at the end of the first week? Any ideas? Let's say you know the end of inventory at the end of the first week. How do you calculate the end of inventory at the end of the second week? That is what we call the inventory balance equation. Yes.
What you have minus what you sold.
Exactly. So inventory at the end of the week equals to the inventory at the end of the previous week minus whatever you sell this week. That is the inventory balance equation. And another constraint is you have an initial inventory of 2,000. So that's the initial inventory constraint. And then we have the demand in week T that is given by our demand equation. And then we also have the non-activity constraint. So your demand constraint is given for these linear functions. So the demand in every week is controlled by your price. So that's your demand constraint. Then you have the non-activity constraint. Basically, it says that you cannot set a negative price. And you cannot have negative sales. So both the price and sales has to be non-negative. Any questions? Okay. So if you put it together, you have a nice optimization problem. You maximize your 15-week profit subject to this set of constraints. And after you formulate it, you can solve it by optimization software, for example, Excel solver. And after you solve it, you will see this is output from Excel solver. You see that the optimal price is actually gradually decreased. And it makes sense, right? We go to the stores, it's always some promotion goes on, the price gradually decreases, and that is optimal. And the optimal profit under the optimal choice of price is $111,000. And okay, I know intuitively the optimal price goes down, makes sense. Do you have any mathematical explanations or economic explanations why the price should go down throughout the time horizon? Any ideas? Yes.
So probably that explains why.
Yeah. As time goes by, the maximum demand goes down. So to stimulate demand, you need to set a lower price. And also, you are getting closer and closer to the end of the planning horizon. You're getting closer and closer to the end of the season. So your inventory value also goes down. Basically, if you don't sell it by the end of the 15th week, you have to sell it at a huge discount. So you actually have a pressure to sell. Okay, and with the optimal price, your optimal sales also goes down. And the idea is why the optimal sales also goes down. Because we know if we charge a lower price, our demand will go up. But why would the sales go down? Yeah, you want to? No, you always, for this picture, you always have something to sell, even to the end of, so it's not bounded by the inventory. It's more because of your demand curve. As you go further into the sales season, the demand gradually goes down. So although you charge a lower price, the sales actually goes down. Okay, so this picture is what we see when our inventory cost is $1. That is, it takes $1 to move from week to week. What if your inventory cost is actually $10? If it's $10, you will sell a lot at the beginning. Then you will sell out in week 10. And from week 11 to 15, you don't have anything to sell. It makes sense because it's expensive to hold inventory. So that's why you want to get rid of inventory as fast as you can. So if you have a higher inventory cost, your sales is more front-loaded. Does it make sense? And another thing we want to compare is the optimal price versus myopic price. So what is myopic price? Myopic price means that for every week, I choose the price that maximizes the revenue or maximize the profit for this week only. I don't look into the future. I don't look into the future, I just focus on this week. I want to maximize profit for this week. So as you can see, for the myopic price, it's typically lower than the optimal price because you live every week as the end of the season. So every week, I only focus on this week, I don't see the future. That's why I charge a lower price. And the sales will have this shape. You sell out in week 7. And then from week 8 onwards, you have nothing left to sell because every week you're maximizing profit for this week. So if you compare myopic versus optimal, you see that for the optimal price, it's 30% higher than the myopic. And the profit is also 30% higher. So you will think, why would people act myopically? But a lot of times people do act myopically. Like with the deadlines to report the financial performances. Like I want to report this quarter's sales. So there are a lot of myopic behavior in supply chain, although it is not optimal. I think I'm almost time. Okay, so I have some other examples. One example is you actually have competition of 2 firms. And they're setting price. So the total demand of each firm not only depends on your own price, but also depends on your competitor's price. So in this case, your demand is decreasing in your own price, but increasing in the competitor's price because the two companies sell substitutable products. So your demand function will not only depend on your price, but also depends on your competitor's price. So in this case, let's say company B sets a price of 100. What should company A do? So company A, because you know the price for company B, you can plug in the demand function for company A. And then you calculate the intercept for company A, it's 7,725. And then you have this linear function for company A, you can solve for the optimal price for company A. So same calculation as we did before, company A should charge $39 if the company B charges 100. And this is what we call best response of company A to company B. But then company B will react to what company A does, and it will charge a price as the best response for company A. So you do this iteratively. So in this case, company A's problem is to choose the optimal price to maximize the revenue for itself. This is very important. Company A only has control over its own price. It doesn't have control over its competitor's price. So it chooses its own price to maximize its own profit. And company B does the same. So they will iteratively iteratively giving best response to their competitors. And in the end, the price will converge. The price will converge. So once you arrive at the point that company A's price is the best response of company B's price, and company B's price is the best response of company A's price, this is where we call the Nash equilibrium, because at that time, nobody has any incentive to deviate. That's where the market will end up with. And I'm running out of time. I actually have other exciting examples, but I'm not going to go over it. So the last minute, I want to say, if this is the problems you are interested in solving, our business school has all these exciting programs in supply chain analytics and business analytics at the undergraduate level, and you're welcome to take these programs. And then at the master's level, we have masters in business analytics, which will solve similar programs like this. And at the PhD level, we have the PhD in operations management, PhD in management science, which will solve a lot of similar problems. And that's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. That was very